So we spent, I don't know, an hour roughly talking through, a week's worth of thought on gun control last episode. And it seemed rational and well thought out, and at least logical in some sense. And then I came across an article that I wanted to call attention to for a bite this week that I just kind of shook my head. How can we have people that are this dumb in positions to be quoted? Is really the first thought that came to mind. The headline is a Republican congressman blames mass shootings on women having rights. And it's a little bit maybe hyperbolic, but not by much. So Representative Billy Long, who is from Missouri, right? Yeah, Missouri, decided to do an interview. Vanity Fair posted some of the information, and the question specifically posed to him was whether there was any appetite in D.C. among Republicans to look at doing things differently as it relates to guns. And Representative Long responded that no one had been able to come up with any kind of suggestion that would have helped in any of those situations, that passing gun control measures is not the solution because they're blaming inanimate objects. And when he was growing up in Springfield, the murder rate was less. Now it's higher. And so he goes back to something happening in society, and that thing that he states that happened was abortion. That's such a farcical string of thoughts to string together to try to come up with a correlation between guns and abortion just because it's a talking point. I mean, that's being generous at saying there was even any thought given to trying to craft this string of nonsensical shit together. But one of the things that I found even more interesting about the article, like obviously that's just hogwash, but Vanity Fair, I'm going to quote them word for word on one string, or I think it's two sentences, that I just laughed because it perfectly summarized my view on it as well. Republicans have launched a competition in which they duke it out to see who can come up with the most ridiculous thing to blame mass shootings on besides guns. So far, that's included too many doors, not enough God, pot, single moms, unarmed teachers, and schools being designed without tripwires and man traps.
Oh, they did the list for us.
They did. There's actually 6 there, I noticed. I thought there was 5 originally. I think the article might have been edited since I first looked at it.
I think, I think the too many doors is what wins it for me. Because there are laws written stating there need to be X number of doors in case of fires, because if you don't have enough doors, you can't get all the folks out. So that's the one that wins it for me.
I find latching onto the doors argument to be hilarious because I saw a snippet of an interview of Ted Cruz responding to the same. So all of this is spurred from the Uvalde, Texas shooting, and anecdote or side note. Multiple other shootings have occurred since then. None of them are any less tragic than the others, but you'll notice none of them have had the same level of public spotlight placed on them. I think the one in Philadelphia might be the closest to have at least receiving some level of media attention. But all of that is a whole different conversation. But back to the Ted Cruz thing. He wanted to basically redesign schools to have a single point of entry. And my first thought was, and the moment you have a fire that blocks that point of entry, you lose the entire school.
Right.
How dumb are we going to be with, this is obviously rhetorical given our trajectory so far. But how dumb are we going to be around gun control that we're going to focus on anything and everything instead of the actual problem? This reminds me of the American love of the imperial system instead of the metric system.
Yeah,
where we will literally measure something by football fields or whales or some other random off-the-wall thing instead of meters.
Familiar with the Boston area? There's a bridge connecting, spanning the Charles River, connecting Boston to Cambridge, and it's measured in smoots. It was a dude. It was the height of some guy called Smoot. Yeah, refrigerator. I've heard like refrigerator links. I've heard that as a unit of measure. So, I just love when watching the video of Ted Cruz being asked about that, and he's proposing that there were too many doors, and the question, there was a Sky News reporter that was asking him. And he just kept, Sky News reporter was polite and respectful, but kept pressuring him for a better answer. And you know what Ted Cruz did?
He walked away.
He found a door. He found a door to walk through.
Yeah, I can at least come up with a convoluted argument for too many doors. Like, as dumb as it is, I can think through a flawed argument, but an argument nonetheless for too many doors. I think for me, it's got to be pot.
Oh,
I've never known a stoner want to hurt somebody.
No, there are no, yeah.
I mean, I guess you could make another convoluted argument there about like money but then you could link that to robbery, not mass shooting.
Right. It's really hard to get there. It's
knock over a 7-Eleven for Cheetos.
I mean, you don't even you just have to, be clever about, I suppose you just have to be clever about putting them in your jacket or something. And it's not even that. It's not even. It's probably. I feel like potheads are more likely to, or if you're stoned, I feel like you would be more likely to try to sneak food into a theater that you're not supposed to than steal food.
Yeah, I would agree.
And at that point, you're not even breaking the law. You're just breaking the theater rules.
Like I would expect more to like grab a jar of peanut butter and shove it in your pants and go to a movie, right? And just be eating out of the jar. That kind of ridiculousness than trying to circumvent the law.
You know what the easiest food to sneak into a theater is? Cinema?
I would think something in a box.
My experience has been Taco Bell.
Oh, really?
You can sneak so much Taco Bell into a cinema.
That makes sense, because anytime you buy from them, you can get your 3 families worth of food in one bag.
Right, and it's all wrapped in, individually wrapped. It's pretty safe to, it's really easy to get Taco Bell into the cinema.
Makes sense.
And you see the connection there between potheads and Taco Bell.
Yeah, I do.
mean, there's no stretch right there. That Venn diagram is almost a circle.
All right, so going back to ranking them, so Too Many Doors takes the top spot for you. What would you put after that? So we're going from 1 down to 5, I suppose. So what's the second best ridiculous answer?
If I hadn't seen some things about some psychoses related to heavy pot use in teenagers, and I think having to do with underdeveloped frontal lobe sort of things, I would have picked that as number 4, but I think unarmed teachers is the next one. I feel like that's a ridiculous thing to do.
Yeah, so it's definitely not the answer. It's definitely a ridiculous thing to do. I'm not arguing that. Like my mindset on the way I've approached this is just a little bit different. It's more, can I craft an argument for it, even if it's wrong or completely horrible?
Right. Even if you're defending the indefensible.
Right. Or is it so absurd that I can't even get through crafting a horrible argument for it without laughing my ass off? Right? And so because of that, I actually would have put even though it's not in this sentence, I guess that's kind of maybe this one's not allowed. I mean, the premise of the article was talking about the representative targeting abortion as being the answer, right? So I thought that was the next most ridiculous answer. Do we want to allow it since it's in the article, or do we want to keep it to just this list?
No, allow it.
Okay. Because for me, it's similar to the pot one. I can't think of any rational argument that takes abortion and has any type of correlation to a mass shooting.
Yeah. And there was quite the opposite effect in the 90s.
Well, and even prior to the 90s, like you go through U.S. history. I guess this is more my issue with it. You go through the entire history of the world. This is not an uncommon thing. It's taken different forms. It started with herbal or natural tonics, I guess would be a way to put it, or concoctions to attempt to induce something similar, right? And then eventually got to medically prescribed, practiced, licensed, like all of that stuff. So far more procedural and scientific in nature. Never in all of these different places, except the United States, has there been such a focus of abortion in conversation and such a high rate of mass shootings. Like you can look at so many other social and cultural groups to disprove the abortion theory, like with a snap of your fingers, that it's mind-boggling that this would even be a talking point. And I think I interrupted you a couple of times, didn't I?
Yeah, I just was thinking, I was like, I have misplaced my second most ridiculous one. I'm going to have to bump down the unarmed teachers and replace that one with the schools designed without tripwires and man traps.
That one was so close for me, too.
Yeah, that's super. That's ridiculous. It's as ridiculous. I mean, the Doors is. I feel like the Doors took it as a little more ridiculous because I heard it first, and also that I don't know. It feels like it might be easier to sell that one, whereas the man traps and tripwires, I'm just like, well, there were jokes that were made about like, why don't we just put up some fences with some razor wire on top and maybe some towers where people watch them. You basically describe a prison yard. So,
and maybe you have a minefield out in front.
Right? Because kids don't die from mines.
Yeah,
that's not a thing.
Maybe a couple of roof-mounted machine guns.
Some snipers, with sniper rifles.
Oh, and air surveillance. You've got to have a drone constantly at a minimum, if not a helicopter.
And if you can't afford a drone, how about like a balloon? Let's go like World War I style.
Yeah. If the man traps and tripwires statement wasn't combined, I could at least make an argument for man traps under certain situations, because financial institutions often have them as well.
Right.
So
in jewelry stores.
Yeah. The front doors, normally you enter through a set of doors, and there's a second set of double doors in a lot of institutions the way they're built, and it's so that if you see somebody coming, that first door is opened, you press like a panic button or an emergency alarm, and both sets of doors are closed, and the suspect is theoretically trapped, right? So there's a conceptual element there that you can at least make the case for that might be a worthwhile study, right? But the tripwire thing, and having that in conjunction with it, is just so ridiculously stupid.
Well, I mean, it would have...
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I'm just thinking because the only thing you're doing with a tripwire is creating a booby trap. That's it. There's no other scenario where a tripwire is doing anything else. You're creating a booby trap of some sort. And you know full well that means the next wave of refinements to this supposed protection system are more convoluted and advanced and deadly booby traps. And it's going to be a never-ending escalation of...
cat and mouse.
Yes. And then eventually you're going to literally have prisoner camps at schools.
Well, and there's no chance that like a child could get,
Oh, of course not. Children never trip over things or fall into places
or do things that they shouldn't be doing or be where they shouldn't be being.
Yeah, I mean, you'd have kids intentionally trying to trigger it all the time.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Then there's then it has, then it starts to have to carry the weight of the fire alarm, and that hasn't stopped a kid. Because at the end of the day, kid, worst thing you can do to a kid with a fire alarm is eventually expel him.
Yeah, and they're not going to be too concerned about that. It's just a free year out.
Right.
I mean, obviously it depends on parental response and everything else too, but still, whoever thought that expulsion was legitimately a disciplinary course of action?
I mean, it's not like that's just harder on ends up being harder on the parents, and maybe sometimes some parents that's they're doing the best they can, and maybe some parents need to do better, but that's neither here nor there. That's case by case.
So, what would then what, number 3? Isn't that what we're at?
So no, I'm down to 4 because
that's right. Because So just to recap, you had too many doors, the tripwires and man traps,
booby traps,
and then unarmed teachers.
Unarmed teachers, yes.
Okay. So what takes number 4 for you?
This one's kind of hard for me because...
Or maybe actually, since I only have done 1 and 2, maybe I should do number 3 first. So to recap, I put pot first, abortion second. I have a hard time not picking the not enough God argument as third. And most of the reasoning is because it's focusing in on that just general tick of mine, that pet peeve that I hate, which is where we weaponize religion. And it's a commonly used theme, especially in the United States, when it comes to Christianity. And obviously, this isn't specifically stating that. If I follow through the article, maybe it is. But the entire focus of saying we don't have enough religion in our life, and that's the problem, I don't know about you, but every time I turn around, I hear yet another religious statement that's either woefully incorrect or misguided, or maybe 10% of the time, like, on track. If they had actually decided to focus in on helping people or being supportive of people, getting people the mental or physical or emotional assistance they need, that would be the argument that I would say would be bringing more of this concept of godliness into the argument, and would actually be indicative of what teachings actually try to instruct people to do. And so this one, the reason this one ranks up there for me is because you're arguing that on the basis of this principle or set of principles or guiding philosophies, however you want to phrase it, you're operating where you invoke the religious name, right? So in this case, you invoke the name God, meaning there's not enough of the fear of God and fire and brimstone teaching being one interpretation, or there's not enough imposition of Christian thoughts and ideas and values throughout society. And both of those are so horrifically anti-Christian that that's why I find it so ridiculous. Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
I don't know of a better way to phrase it, but you use this as an excuse, but the excuse is the embodiment of the opposite of the excuse you're using. So that's why I would put it number 3.
Yeah, I'm gonna put it in my next one, because I was like, sometimes when you get too much God, then you become a fanatic, and then you're back to mass shootings again, or bombings. Or
it is certainly not outside the realm of what we see often with extremists with every religious group.
Yeah,
actually,
that's what I mean. That's
well, I want to pull my statement back real quick, because I said every, and that's an absolute. I don't know that I've ever heard of a Jewish extremist. Maybe they exist.
They do,
and I'm just not on the same level, right? Like what we always hear about are Islamists and Christian extremists, typically.
Right, not on this level in this country. I think you might have. I think if you're in the Middle East, in Israel, you might see a little more of it. But
that's a very fair point,
especially with the treatment of the Palestinian peoples. But
but the whole thing that I was doing was just saying, we know that extremists exist across all spectrums. That's an absolute I'm certainly willing to put into play. I just shouldn't say every religion when I don't know for a fact that I've heard of extremists in every religion.
Right. And it's not it's not even important which singling out this religion versus that religion. There are just times when there are people who are so motivated by fundamentalist aspects of a religion, or the fundamentalist extremes of a religion, that they will become militant and violent. So and that is not limited to any particular religion. I'm not sure that happens in Buddhism. It just seems like it's a little bit harder, but I'm sure you might be able to consider, like, self-violence, like there, when maybe some there's a famous picture of a Buddhist monk practicing self-immolation. So that's violence in a different way, and it's sort of, I'm not going to say that's more acceptable, but it's it's different. Okay, this just in. I just happened to see this. State Republican Brian Slatton said a ban was necessary to protect children from perverted adults, citing viral video of children attending a Dallas drag show. So I'm not sure. It's a Texas lawmaker, so I'm not sure if there's a direct link with mass shootings, but they're ready to ban drag queens. It's like Monday mass shooting.
That sounds like a Texas response.
Yeah.
So does I'll allow it. Like the argument against non-heterosexual alpha male behavior. Is that maybe a good way to put it politically?
You mean toxic masculinity?
That's probably the slightly better way to put it.
Yeah.
So does that take number 4 for you, and something else move, or does that round out
it throws the whole list off.
Okay. Well, in that case, I don't have to try to figure out what I would put as 4 and 5, but I can just say all of the door arguments and tripwires and everything else. They're somewhere in those 2 slots for me.
Not enough God didn't really make it for me, because I get the logic there. Like, that's the easiest logic for me to follow. I still think it's flawed, because even if you don't have enough God, you can still make it more difficult to ban firearms. Wait, I said that wrong. You can still make it more, firearms don't have to be so readily available or so easy to acquire.
Well, I think so we're trying to think about it rationally still, and you can't. Like the way you would phrase that, I think, would be even without the prevalence of God, mass shootings could still be dissuaded or reduced by remembering this fundamental problem, right? Because again, they're doing everything they can to not target the gun itself. So, to say that you would regulate guns or anything else, that's taking it a step too far from the argument perspective. So it's, how would you phrase that? It would be, not enough God creates the persona or emotional or mental instability to increase the likelihood of mass shootings.
So the question is,
Right?
if you're not religious enough, perhaps you shouldn't be allowed to purchase a firearm. Like you now must, before you can purchase a firearm, you must demonstrate your devotion to the deity of whichever religion you've chosen.
I mean, that's basically what their argument is. Yes.
Well, they're not, passing any laws for that.
Well, of course not. Because there's something about access to guns in that.
Well, the logical conclusion is that if you don't have enough God in your life, then you shouldn't be allowed to acquire a firearm. I mean, that's simple.
Yeah, but then you get into the separation of church and state arguments. And they don't want to bring that up.
Okay. I'm gonna let it go.
No, I think it's fun to chase this through, because I'm struggling with how you would phrase the not enough God argument. Anyway, right? You're not going to say anything about gun control. That's the whole basis for how ridiculous all of this stuff is. It's access to guns is not the problem. These other things are. So if you're not going to do anything about access to guns, then taking the, demonstrating some amount of fervor or allegiance to a particular set of religious beliefs, it's fine as an argument until you get to the point of to acquire or to purchase or whatever, because then that's a form of gun control, which is exactly what they're doing everything in their power to not do. So how do you change that statement to be about the shooter instead of about the weapon of choice? Because I'm struggling with that. I actually am not entirely sure how you would phrase that, other than it being a verbal talking point just to try to generate, support from fanatical religious people, which is exactly what the number of candidates have done in the Southeast anyway, because it seems to be what gets votes. But that's a whole different argument too.
The only thing I can think of now is you could blow with this or you could blow with that. The only lyrics in the song "Weapon of Choice" by Fatboy Slim. But yeah, so
and again, the reason that I didn't mind following that is because it illustrates how ridiculous saying "not enough God" is as a
right. If you follow that logic, then you start to have separation of church and state issues, and it also does not avoid the issue that they're trying to avoid, because the logical conclusion is if you don't have enough God in your life, if you cannot demonstrate a certain religious level or meet some sort of requirement or demonstrate some sort of a certain level of devotion to your chosen religion, then you're not allowed to access firearms. That's the logical conclusion. I know what they mean to say is that if people were, if we could, not ban prayer from school, then people would be more religious. No, you're just forcing your religion on it, and that's not a logical argument at all. But that's where they're trying to take it, and that it's so completely flawed, that the logic is so completely flawed. And if you start to point these things out to folks like this, you might get to a place where it's like, well, you're too smart for your own good. Those sort of comments might start coming at you, and then it's like, well, I just can't be dumber. Like, it doesn't seem like it's a good idea to be dumber.
So I can tell you some of the other arguments that come with, then you just don't understand God, or you don't believe in God after all, or it's always an attack on the religious side of it, if it is someone who is professing themselves to be a Christian, it's never an attack on the logic. Never. Just a fun little anecdote to add in. I would imagine very similar in with other religions. That just happens to be the one I can speak to. The other two bites that you put in, and I didn't follow the link for one of them. The other one doesn't show a link for me. You want to talk a little bit about the whole shootings will be the new kidnapping?
Yeah, it was kind of a. I put that in there as just sort of a starter thought, and when I started looking some things up about it, I don't think it pans out, but I thought it would. I thought I'd bring it up and kind of talk about it.
Well, and real quick before you explain it, my initial thought was how we went from kidnapping not being much of a public talking point to it being just massively focused on and then kind of falling under the radar and just taking on different names that are less focused on but still just as prevalent. And that was kind of the train of thought that I had, but I don't know if I was interpreting the thoughts appropriately.
It's pretty close. So this came about. Becca likes to watch true crime documentaries a lot, and so I never did before, but I am now watching them with her from time to time because they just suck you in, man. There's like how much certain things happen in the world that are just so far removed from my daily life. It's just like, wow. Anyway, this particular true crime story was quite interesting because it had to do with a 7-year-old boy named Steven Stainer who was abducted in 1972 or 1973. Anyway, abducted when he was 7 years old, was captive for over 7 years, escaped in 1980 when he was 14. A couple weeks after his captor kidnapped another little boy who was about 5 years old. So after this boy that was 5 years old was kidnapped in 1980, he realized, what happened to him was going to happen to the new boy. So when his captor was gone at work, he took the 5-year-old and escaped. Anyway, Stainer's captor's name was, I can't remember what his first name was, but his surname was Parnell. Parnell was arrested and convicted of kidnapping and ended up serving less time in prison than Stainer was captive of his. But I mean, can you imagine losing your child at 7 years old and getting him back at 14? So much changes. Like it's a brand new person.
It's
horrifying.
Yes. Yeah. It's
horrifying. Anyway, ends up being tragic. Boy is 14-year-old. There's, they have struggle. He has struggles reassimilating into his family's life. It was interesting because there was a documentary that, like a made-for-TV miniseries that was made, about his story. 9 years later when he was in his mid-20s, and it was like an NBC movie, like miniseries, 2-night thing, and it was called I think my name is Steven, or I know my name is Steven, because that's what he told the police when he arrived with the 5-year-old captive. Anyway, it goes back to his family when he's 14. There's some difficulty assimilating. He has difficulty going back to school, various things like that, and ends up dropping out of school, gets married at like 17 or 19 as a teenager, has a couple of kids, and at the age of 24, dies in a motorcycle accident. So that was in 1989. And then 10 years later, his brother loses it and is a serial killer and murders 4 women in and around Yosemite National Park. So it's just a really unlucky family, a really unlucky life to have lived.
So I had not heard the name. The name of the documentary at least sounds like something that I had heard of, but I know I have not watched it. But as you were describing things, like, my thought was that it wasn't going to be a tragic death, the motorcycle accident. It was going to be suicide. That tends to be how those types of stories end up when there is significant difficulty with reassimilation or finding your way to a new normalized social existence, right, after that type of trauma. And then I completely did not see the brother serial killer angle coming.
No, I didn't either. And when I was when we were watching it in the first episode, like, I have a habit of ruining the story by going and looking on Wikipedia. And I was like, oh my God, I have to tell you this. It's like, I did not see this coming, because when I searched up Stainer, like I searched by the last name. When I search Stainer on Wikipedia, the serial killer brother comes up first. Like, that's who I found first, and that's why I was like, oh my God, I have to tell you this. So, but anyway, what I saw was, as I was reading about the captor Parnell, he ended up getting arrested again in 2004, and so I think he got a life sentence. He didn't. So in 1980, when he was arrested for kidnapping, he served, I think, less than 7 years. And it was just like, it's just so ironic, like hideously ironic, that his prison sentence was less than the boy was his captive. Less than, Stephen was his captive for longer than his prison sentence. But then he gets, in 2004, he didn't even kidnap another child. He was trying to make plans and was trying to pay someone to help him, trying to get an accomplice to kidnap a boy. And he got life in prison. And it was like such a stark difference for that. And so I didn't want to come with just like noticing those differences in the sentences. I went and looked at California, the penal code, and there's like if you do for a kidnapping first offense, it's a 7-year sentence. And so, I mean, it kind of makes me think, like, kidnapping is typically not the only thing that you're going to get for that. Like, if you kidnap somebody for 2 days, and you get a 7-year sentence, I'm like, that seems. It's hard to say that seems fair, but typically, I guess, in a kidnapping case, something like in the case of Stephen Stainer, kidnapping was not the only offense. There were many, many other offenses and many other things that they could charge him for. But it just seemed like I made this connection where I thought perhaps, in the 70s and 80s, we kind of didn't give a shit about kids. And that was, so kidnapping had a short, the sentencing wasn't terribly long. And so by the early 2000s, that had sort of changed. And maybe that was sort of the connection that I made in my head. And then I thought maybe that will happen with firearms. Right now we don't give a shit about kids getting shot up in school, but maybe in a generation or two, it'll be incredibly important, and they won't stand for the bullshit that we're letting happen, and maybe that's when we'll see a change. That was the connection I was thinking of, but I don't know that is it's just maybe a thought.
Yeah, it makes sense. I fully expect that in another probably 2 generations, as you get the next couple of waves of people becoming eligible to vote, that you'll start to see a shift in who's elected. That's my hope, anyway. Predominantly from just thinking about the most likely outcomes of the really generational voting gaps, I guess, is a good way to think of it. And I have no data to support this. This is just the way I feel about it, and it may be horrifically wrong. But typically speaking, at least in most areas that I have visited, older generations tend to still think of the parties in the way the parties were described to and expressed for them. And so the talking points tend to be smaller federal government intervention and more regulation being the two opposing theories. And that's kind of what they go by. Like that's assuming that they don't dive into a candidate's platform and policies and things like that. It's just this party stands for less government intervention in my life, and this party typically means more government intervention in my life, right? So if you go to your oldest generations of voters, that tends to be the types of arguments that I hear. And if you go to your next kind of senior level of voters, it's not that detached, but it's more focused on perceived truthfulness of journalistic information. Going back to what we've talked about plenty of times about you gravitate toward those information sources that echo your values and thoughts and the way you expect things to play out. And that's a huge part of the population at the moment. And then you kind of hit that middle-aged bracket that some of them are just fed up with it and are going to either not vote or exercise their vote, but they're not necessarily going to be activist or overly public about things. That tends to summarize Gen X pretty well.
Yeah.
And then you start to get to the younger couple of generations who are being very vocal and are getting the points out there in ways that often will rub other generations the wrong way.
It sounds like millennials.
Yeah, but we're at a point where as that grouping and the next generation or two beyond that starts to create more of the majority in these gerrymandered maps and districts that are catered more toward producing specific results and things of that nature, there's a certain point where that can't control the vote anymore.
Right. I think that, I think we've said this many times, but this is sort of the last hurrah of the conservative movement as we know it. And that being, for various reasons, that being, right, the boomer generation is starting to pass away, and Gen X and millennials are going to start filling the seats of Congress. They're going to start outnumbering the number of votes in Congress. If they don't already, I'm not sure. They already, I think at this point now, is the millennials the largest voting generation at the potential voters, not actual voters, but potential voters, I think is the case.
I think so. I don't know that for sure, but I think I have read that. Yes.
Yeah. The oldest Gen Z are now of voting age. They've been, they would have been able to, their first presidential election would have been the 2020 election. I don't think they're going to be as tolerant of the bullshit as we have been. And I think our children, Gen Alpha, I think that they're going to be even more so. I think it'll be comparable to look at what we were taught, and when we think about the civil rights movement in the 60s, we're just like, that is so, how could that even be a thing? It just seems so obviously wrong and evil. And I think they'll have they'll look at, what's happening now, or what was happening in the 90s, and be like, how could that even, what was going on, So it's just, it's we want to see the progress sooner and faster because we know that this is wrong. This is evil. This is corrupt. People are just trying to hang on to power. It's now power for power's sake, not even for the benefit. Maybe the benefit of a few people. That lobbyists have paid bought and paid for. So,
well, I think a very succinct way to summarize it is that a lot of us now are very acutely aware of the problems, and we're very acutely aware of how wrong a lot of things are, and there's a sense of powerlessness to change that particular scenario, not out of a lack of desire, but out of a lack of obvious paths forward. Or even inobvious ones for that matter. But like all of the choices for elected officials in the state of Alabama, for example, are basically the same with different talking points. None of them are going to be progressive and move us toward the sphere of influence that we want to be. And unfortunately, the type of candidate that would is not going to get elected currently in the state.
I was just going to say that if you have somebody who would actually make a good difference, conservative or progressive, because there are conservative folks, running for positions, and they actually would make a difference. A better, it's better than the status quo. It may not be exactly what I want, but better than the status quo. But they're not going to get elected. Like you said, they're not going to get elected because they aren't the status quo. And
they barely even register double digits in polls if they happen to get that far. And it's not resignation to that fact either, right? Like if that were the case, you wouldn't have us talking about it because that's at least something that I can do, right? I don't know what else I can do other than vote and talk about it and maybe write about it and maybe make a phone call. As other things present themselves, sure, I will do other things. My best case for moving the needle is to make sure my son is equipped to do so.
Yeah. Well, our parents' generation, they taught us certain things, and we turned out this way, and perhaps our children will turn out in a way that's even more, they'll take it to the next level. So,
which is basically a ideological way that we've just described every parent's wish in general, right?
Right. It could swing the other way. I feel like it won't, but it could swing the other way. Maybe on individual cases, but not as a whole generation. I was just going to say, to bring it back around, the other thing, how this idea of kidnapping will become the new shooting. It's really, it's not so much the mass shooting. It's that's what will lead to reducing the ease of access to firearms. But as far as like an actual mass shooter, they tend to die at the end of the shooting. So it's not that they'll go to jail for longer. That's not the issue, because they tend to die in the mass shooting. But I'm going to use that as a segue to talk about the next bite, and because sometimes people who do use firearms to murder people and then survive and get acquitted of their murder might run into some troubles later on in life. Maybe like a year later. The article is that Texas A&M University refutes the claim that Kyle Rittenhouse, will be attending their school. So he went on a show. I can't remember what show it was. But the Guardian reports that on the show, Rittenhouse he pulled out a A&M hat, said he was going to go to the university, and he said it would be awesome. He was really looking forward to it. And a spokesperson for Texas A&M said, nope, he is not applied, and he is not admitted to this school. So then it turns out that he was um, going to. I think he had tried to or talked about applying to this last year, going to Arizona State University, and there was such an outrage from the ASU students that he was not there. He was actually just taking an online course for non-degree seeking students. So he had not gone through the admissions process there and was not currently enrolled there. And I think where he actually ended up, he's at it sounds like a junior college. And there's even at this particular junior college, it's not exactly segregation. He's not exactly with the student population there.
He's not just a free-roaming normal student.
Correct.
Yeah.
Anyway, I thought that was interesting.
It is.
He's doing a lot of. He's going on some conservative shows. He's doing a lot of image crafting, and people are calling him out for it.
Which is surprising, given how much they wanted to stand behind him at first. Or am I misremembering? I seem to recall initially there was also some appearances on assorted programs, and there was more of a celebratory atmosphere. Or am I thinking of a different shooter?
No. It was sort of celebratory.
That's what I thought.
Among certain folks.
Right. Because I guess just to go back, Rittenhouse was the one who traveled from across state lines to defend a dealership and ended up shooting 3 people, right?
2.
2.
Oh, maybe he shot 3 people, but two were murdered.
Yeah, I think it was 2 deceased, 1 injured. And eventually acquitted, in my opinion, wrongly, but that's my opinion, so whatever. At the time of all of that transpiring, I know that there were celebratory kind of remarks and discussions and creating this image of a well-meaning average Joe elevated to, like, I'm not going to say hero level. Like it wasn't celebrated like a hero necessarily, but it was in between.
It was. I feel like it was more the fact that his case was. I feel like maybe his case. Maybe it wasn't. The case wasn't celebrated, or the verdict wasn't celebrated, but it was. There was certainly some grandstanding.
And all of that is just to say that it's interesting that the public image that was crafted and portrayed then, which seems to be the same public image that's continually being exuberated, or it's not exhumed. Exhumed? Wrong. That's certainly not the right word. The same image that is...
I don't know, yeah.
Yeah, the same image that is obviously being exhibited. That's what I was trying to think of. Exhibited is now backfiring. And I just find that transition to be fascinating.
Yeah. And just to get the timeline a little bit better, he said he was going to Texas A&M. Texas A&M, a spokesperson from Texas A&M said that he had not been admitted as a student, and then he backpedaled and said he wouldn't be attending Texas A&M, that he would be going to a community college called Blinn College, which was a feeder school for Texas A&M. But the folks at representative from Blinn College confirmed that he had applied but had not enrolled for any. He was not enrolled for any classes.
So how much of that is just him not doing the paperwork versus like actually running into problems with the universities, I wonder?
Well, A&M feels like they flat out said that they didn't admit him. For Blinn College, they said he hadn't been enrolled, so I don't know why he hadn't been enrolled. He's not from Texas. He'd have to move to Texas and pay out-of-state tuition.
Well, I would expect Texas would be more welcoming of the
right?
general persona that he has crafted.
Universities tend to be a bastion of progressive and non-conservative, so that could have something to do with it. I don't know. So, and that's not to say that progressives don't like guns either. That's not the case. They just don't like shooting people.
I remember seeing a meme. I'm not so sure it was actually a meme as opposed to just a picture that was then subsequently shared as though it was a meme. But it was a graduation cap that had something about along the lines of "I completed college without becoming a liberal," I think was the way it was phrased. And I had to laugh a little bit because I understand the more educated you are, the more likely you are to understand that you've been fed a lot of crap, disguised as fact up to a certain point. And the whole point of a degree is to teach you to think critically and analytically. And if your degree did not do that, it has failed you, which means you probably went and studied marketing. But that was just, I had to get a jab in there. I had to. But generally speaking, any degree, regardless of what you get it in, except marketing, should teach you to think critically and analytically. That's really the whole point of a college education.
Yeah, I don't have
institutions
a
do
degree.
better.
I don't have a marketing degree, but I feel like there's some marketing jobs I'd be excellent at.
Oh, I'm sure. And so Emily doesn't specifically have a marketing degree. It's actually a degree in journalism, but I kind of jab at it a little bit because of the transition into a marketing role before taking on the COO role. And so I have fun with it. It's absolutely just me jabbing at that little inside joke. It is not at all reflective of people who have actually pursued marketing degrees because I don't know what you study. I'm just having fun with the whole marketing aspect of career paths that my wife has taken.
I think a journalist degree is worse than a marketing degree.
Oh. I'm going to relay that and just see what's said. But going back to, we digressed enough, I think. Going back to this general concept of universities typically being more, we'll say more liberal in thought processes in general, if you were to really survey like the entire population. Do you think that holds true everywhere? Or do you think that's more regionalized at certain levels? And what I mean by that, like if I were to go back to Georgia, where I did my undergraduate, Columbus State University, I would say would be more of a hodgepodge of regional thoughts, whereas the University of Georgia would certainly be more of a hodgepodge of multi-regional thoughts, because it would have a larger draw as a larger university than a smaller, what used to be a community college turned into a part of the university system of Georgia, but it still was a much smaller institution, right? So for the most part, if you weren't focused on music or computer science, there wasn't a reason outside of that localized region to look at CSU as a destination. And so where I'm going with that train of thought is, would it be more likely that A&M would actually be more of a quote-unquote bastion of progressive thought than the community college? Or do you think that there's that big a distinction between colleges and universities in general?
I think you'd find a significant distinction just based on the size of that university. They have more funding. They have the ability to draw in professors from. They have more I don't want to say more education, but yeah, it is more education. You're going to have more PhD professors at A&M than you will have at the community college, and I think the more the concentration of education is going to lead. You're going to see more progressive thinking, and yeah, I can even think of conservative universities. Just having heard some inside information, or just how the faculty of a local Baptist university in the city, just the different departments. You have certain humanities departments and natural sciences departments, where those departments have more progressive thought than. I want to say it was obviously, actually the religion department is probably more progressive than the nursing department. I can't remember which one, or the English department. I don't quite remember, but I was just remember hearing about the differences about how some departments were far more conservative than others within the university. And I think the university as a whole was relatively conservative compared to other universities, especially public universities, versus this being a private university. But I think the university as a whole was probably less conservative than the city that it's located in. So it's just a lot of it's very relative. So, but generally speaking, I think the universities tend to be less conservative than the general population.
So part of why I asked that was to also feed the follow-up question, thinking about the earlier statements about the following generations theoretically being less accepting of where we stand with regards to representation, or whichever way you want to craft that argument, right? Would you think the lack of access in general to higher education to potentially be a detriment to that progressive thought from a generational perspective for making forward progress?
Oh, yeah, I think so.
That piece of it is the piece that makes me wonder if I'm being too hopeful for future generations or not. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
Because from my generational sphere of social interaction, we'll just put it that way, I see so much crap from others in my generation that, some of them are beyond hope, right? That there's no amount of reason or logic or thought or rational discourse or anything else that's going to take whatever they're wanting to state and actually turn it even in the direction of something more truthful. And part of it is also, I'm going to say behavioral, because it encompasses more than just a mental model around something, but the other fallacy or drawback to my generation tends to be this: I don't really care about your opinion because my opinion is right, and I can point to other things that support my opinion, and so I can just ignore it. And we quote unquote Gen X really perfected that whole art of not caring about another opinion, or at least suppressing it enough to not have that opinion matter. Unfortunately, as a byproduct, many of our generation internalized that and became relatively violent in other ways, as has borne out in evidence that we've seen elsewhere. But I don't think we are among the highest of those as a generation that have committed such atrocious acts. That might be a point of research that I follow up on. A lot of digressions there, but generationally speaking, we as a whole tend to be at least the most likely to shrug off outside influences and just continue along with what we believe or feel or think.
Right. This is fine.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say this. Everything is on fire. This is fine.
Yeah. And part of it is also the recognition that we just kind of have to roll with a lot of information coming in and a lot of things changing, and there's a certain amount of I just have to try to navigate the now, and I will understand it as I understand it kind of thing, which is also a drawback in and of itself, because a lot of times you roll with it, you make the wrong decision, and you don't realize you made the wrong decision for a decade, right? There are a lot of things that we could unpack from generational responses to influences overall. Where I was going with all of that, though, is I at least have the outlook of being hopeful for future generations because of some of the things that I see as most likely outcomes, but a lot of it is also predicated on access to some level of higher education. Not even a complete full degree program, just some level of exposure to other cultures and ideas and thoughts beyond high school. I don't care if it's a 2-year degree, I don't care if it's no degree and it's just, a year of classes. That other exposure to a different grouping of social structures is hugely influential in moving the needle forward when you're talking about some sort of progressive thought. And without that, I'm afraid that my reserved optimism for future generations is in serious danger of not becoming a reality.
We have a number of different ways set up for you to get in touch with us to provide feedback, ask questions, or just comment in about something we've discussed.
You can hit us up on Twitter or Instagram at untitled_hosts, or shoot an email over to untitled.hosts@gmail.com.
Or get in touch directly with Jesse at jthart.com, or get in touch with me, John, via telepathy.
If you would like to support our work or are interested in listening to our new after show feed, head over to patreon.com/theUntitledPodcast and take a look at the options we have set up.
Thank you for listening.
We hope you've enjoyed the show.
And we hope to connect with more of you as we continue this journey.
That's a wrap.